Okay. So, good morning. Welcome everyone to this third session of Mindful Saturdays. It's really lovely to be continuing this conversation with Ananya, Indira, and Harini. And for those of you who are going to be tuning in, a very good morning to you. Thank you for encouraging us and being with us in this journey. Um there's a lot of work that we have tried to put in into this particular session today, and before we get there, I just want to go back to what we have done in the last two sessions very briefly. So we started basically in the first session. We talked about uh, the practice of mindfulness, what it means, uh, why is it important, and Ananya, Harini, and Indira talked about their experiences of this very ancient practice that can take us all on a beautiful inner journey. Uh, we then followed that up with something that is very fundamental as an emotion which affects all of us, and we all struggle with it, and which is the emotion of anger. And that was the second session. Uh, and in between, of course, we've had a lot of friends and colleagues who have got back to us with their very encouraging comments. And the reason why we are here again today is because we've been encouraged with a lot of positive responses uh, from many friends, colleagues, and so on. Uh, for the third session, I would like to share a few thoughts before I get to this wonderful panel. Uh, I've been reflecting, on our sessions myself, and the more I think about it, the more it seems to me that many of these deep uh, emotions that we experience, that we struggle with, and often we are overcome by them uh, through our reactions to people, to events, and so on. Uh, I've been wondering as to why it happens, and perhaps what can you do about it uh, as an individual and at a deeper level. And I feel that, in fact, I was just writing it down before this session that uh, what is what can happen if we take care of ourselves a little more. Uh, Perhaps because we do not care enough for our own emotions and our own reactions and our own behaviors, we allow them to seep in and you know take us further. So somewhere I think, as a in a very layperson kind of way, if I believe that if we are able to probably be a little more compassionate towards ourselves, uh, we would be less affected, or probably less adversely affected, by some of these deep emotions and feelings that we all struggle with, and in many cases we are overwhelmed by. uh, and I also believe, I'm linking this back to what we discussed earlier in the first two sessions. Perhaps being a little more compassionate towards ourselves uh, also means learning how to pause and see things. Uh, because without doing that, we cannot understand what is happening. And therefore, the third session is also talking about. I mean, the theme for the third session is really learning to love oneself. I hope this resonates with a lot of our friends uh, who are tuned in and who would like to contribute to this conversation. For those of you who have come into this conversation for the very first time, very quickly, I would like to introduce our panel. Uh, uh, we have Indira, who is a Supreme Court advocate based in Delhi. She's a mindfulness practitioner for several years, and she works for to bring justice to disadvantaged people who normally do not have easy access to the courts and uh, legal processes and so on. Ananya is working with the United Nations Children's Fund as a social policy specialist, and she also is a mindfulness practitioner for several years. And she likes, as she says, being in the moment and living life intuitively. Harini works with an organization called the Center for Learning Resources based in Pune. She, of course, lives in Delhi. She is also associated with the Just Being Center in Pune, which does a lot of work on mindfulness practice. She is a mindfulness and presence oriented counselor who's also into the practice of mindfulness for a very long time. So, welcome, very warm welcome, Ananya, Indira, and Harini, to all of you, and thank you so much for your time and giving so much of yourself, for this, for the Adda, and for what we are trying to uh, do over here. So, without any further ado, let me then take it forward from where I was, talking. Um, being self-compassionate, loving oneself. What does it mean to each one of you? And how have you looked at this? Why is it important? So, three questions. What does it mean, loving oneself, being kind, being compassionate to oneself? How have you looked at it? And why do you think this is important from a and how all of this is related to the overall ideas and concepts of mindfulness practice that we have been talking about so far? So, let me begin this, by throwing this question to Harini.
Thanks, Gary and Ananya and Indira. I'm really looking forward to this. I think we've touched upon the fact that this is very close to our hearts. So, and a good morning to everyone else. Um, it's a subject that makes me feel warm and tender and kind and open. So that's what I'm really touching into right now as I begin to speak. Uh, what does it mean to me? I think at some point in my journey, I began to encounter the idea that we can all have a relationship with ourselves. Most of our lives, we end up having relationship outside of us, with things, with objects, with experiences, with goals, with people. And we do inherently have a relationship with ourselves, but we are not necessarily always aware of it. And very often it is largely uh, a set of labels that we have for ourselves. I'm good, I'm pretty, I'm not pretty, I'm ugly, I'm bright, I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm whatever. That's what we know of a relationship with ourselves. Um, and at some point in my journey, as I explored this, I really began to understand how it is possible to be aware and attentive to what is going on for me and have a kind of interaction with myself as an ongoing thing. And I would like to sort of uh, explain what it means to me by taking the example of what we would imagine a very kind, loving mother would be to a child. And yes, we have all kinds of experiences with parenting, and but I'm using the terms kind and loving and compassionate, and I think all parents have moments of that in their lives where they hopefully many moments when they've encountered that, and children have encountered that with parents. But so what does a caring, loving, compassionate, accepting mother do? Because these are the things that go with self compassion and self love. These are just you start with the assumption that when we're talking about self love, we're talking about kindness, we're talking about care, we're talking about interest, we're talking about non judgmentality and acceptance. These are things that kind of go together. But it's useful, I think, to understand it in terms of how do they look in life rather than just kind of staying with the words. And I like to think of it in terms of a mother. And what
Hmm.
does a very loving mother do with a child? Uh, she would, first of all, have a continuous watch out for the child. Is my
Yeah.
child well? Like at least at the physical well being level. She would take care that the child's physical needs of nourishment and health are met because the child has to be at least first physically well. And that's, I think, the first thing for me that I learned, and I don't necessarily do it as well as I would. There is still a large amount of neglect and um, yeah, neglect, but I value it. I'm able to see that some of these needs are neglected, and I'm aware of these needs. But the first thing is really to be sensitive to the body, to ourselves as um, bodies, and pay attention to them from a perspective of what is truly nourishing, restful, healthy for me. A large set of problems come from just lifestyle issues. We all know that. So, being attentive and aware that our body needs care. That's one thing that I've learned to value. What else would a mother do? A mother would, from time to time, check on the child. How is the child doing? Even if the child is playing on her own or with someone else, keep an eye out. Is she okay? Does she need anything? How's she doing in not just in terms of need, but what's going on? Like what is she involved in right now? Just an interest in she's drawing and looking at it and feeling appreciation for it and participating in it. And that's something that I also value deeply as an aspect of self compassion. The pause that we talked about, pausing from time to time because life is what it is. We all know that. Pausing from time to time to check in and see how I'm doing. What's the experience for me in the moment? Is there an ease? Is there a rush? Is there an anxiety? Uh, Whatever. And seeing if it's possible for me to take a few moments to respond to something that might be a strong need in that moment. Okay, I just need to pause, sit down between three events, back to back meetings. 10 minutes, I need to pause. 5 minutes, I need to sit back, have a quiet cup of water, tea, just sit back, not necessarily go on to another agenda, even if it is taking care of my own child. I mean, as long as, of course,
Hmm.
she's fine. Uh, yeah, so that's something I've really learned. We're constantly responding to a demand outside of us. But we experience wear and tear as a result of all these demands. We experience the rush and the agitation and all of that. So really pausing to support that and come back to at least a semi-restful place between my things, because that
Hmm.
makes me that gives my whole system a bit of a rest from overdrive, and I'm much more fully engaged in the next activity, which helps the next activity to become nourishing.
Hmm.
So then to be able to be with the activity that I'm doing, because I've really created some space between things. So then am I able to fully engage with something that I'm doing? Or am I still in the rush of the previous thing that I was doing? I was on the previous phone call, some really agitated conversation was going on, or I'm still thinking about what is it for lunch, what am I supposed to cook for lunch? And am I coming into my next event with that
Hmm.
charge? I cannot be fully with this event.
Right.
So the nourishment I would draw from this event is also diminished from that. So really taking that time for myself to pause, make space, look into what I need at a given point in time. Uh, sometimes rescheduling things because I might feel like I don't feel ready to take on something, all of those. So that's another thing. Uh, the mother will also take time out to bring nourishment to the child, uh, joy and gratitude, and just enjoy simple things with the child, so that the child's life can have positive experiences, connection. So just loving, holding the child, going out for a picnic, and so doing things that mean positive things for me. That's the nourishment that I like to give. And most importantly, I think leaning towards myself as I would lean towards my child when I'm in distress of any kind, anger, this, that, pain. A lot of times, even with children, we can end up being very judgmental about negative emotions. But what they really need is a holding so that they feel that they have the ground beneath them that can hold them until the storm passes. And in the midst of the storm, they are not really being hit by another storm, which is the anger or anguish of the parent. And that's what we need when we are in distress. So being able to stay with myself, and all the mindfulness practices help with that. Just expanding the capacity to stay with what is, and distress is one of them. So
Hmm.
really allowing the storm to pass within me, meeting myself with a really kind attention, a caring attention, and saying, yes, something is really, really uncomfortable right now, and can I just accompany it? And then being able to see what arises at the end, parts of which we did talk about in the anger episode, because the underlying principle of self compassion that I deeply believe in, of most of what we're talking, is that we are inherently whole and good.
Hmm.
And there is an inherent wholeness that we touch into when we just stay with our experiences without reacting to them. And when
Hmm.
that charge passes, we touch into a certain deep, expansive place, even for 5 minutes. And that is a wise space, that is a whole space, that is also, and that's the space we embody, all of us, every human being. And we are able to see our experiences, no matter how difficult they are, from that space too. That
Hmm.
causes a shift in my relationship with my difficulties.
Right.
But for that, I have to have that caring accompaniment with myself. And there are many ways of doing it. Um, but the attitude is that of patiently being there when there is suffering and difficulty. I'm there for you. I'm not leaving you.
Right.
That's it. Thank you.
Wow. Lovely. I think what I really liked was the analogy you brought, the kind and loving mother. Uh, and to me, it's almost like a mirror image. Everything that that kind and loving mother does, can we learn from that, and can we pick up those elements and do it for ourselves? And I think that's a very powerful way of. And I think we can probably stick to this theme of each human being inherently good, and this whole aspect of how do we touch into that space where we are inherently good, uh, and linking that back to the need to be therefore caring for ourselves. Very, very nice. Thank you so much, Harini, for that sharing. May I invite uh, Indira to share her thoughts on this, on the questions that I have raised? Welcome, Indira. Good morning.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Giri. Thank you, Harini, for that lovely sharing. Thank you, Ananya. And thank you, dear participants. So, I have been reflecting, as have we all, and I've made some notes. So, I'm going to try to unfold them before you like the petals of a flower. So, I'm hoping that you'll be able to see the connections as well. Uh, so there's so much to say about self-care and self-love that it's not that easy to talk about the whys and the wherefores and so on without perhaps looking at so many dimensions of it. So let me try. Uh, for me, learning to love oneself is about really paying attention to oneself and one's needs. We often, even in our practices, we often tend to, even if we are in the present, we tend to lay greater emphasis on other people's needs. At least that's something that I used to do. And and the thing is, it's very difficult to see the difference, nearly difficult to see the difference, because it's so fulfilling as well. If there's something that you believe in, or somebody that you love very much, or something that you love, for instance, your work, or an activity, or just doing something, then there is a tendency to sometimes also lose oneself in that activity or in that relationship, and sometimes virtually cancel yourself in the process. You could just sort of overlook that there are certain needs that you have. So for me, it is about really uh, paying attention to myself and my needs as well, and not ignoring them. So, in a nutshell, that's really what it is. And also to be in touch with my needs, which I think are also not very different from many other people's needs, but we tend to forget that one of the universal needs that we have is to be loved and accepted, to be acknowledged. And one of my needs is also to be heard and to feel understood. Uh, so these are things that are really important to me, and it took me a long time to also figure out that I do want that as part of my relationships. I had a tendency to pay so much attention to the other person's needs that I would also be a very good listener, and also try to pay that kind of attention to that person, and in the process not really pay attention to myself. So I would say that for me it's really important that I've now come in touch with that need of mine. And I would liken it to something like a garden where we have so much of space and we can actually make choices in terms of what we grow in that garden.
Mhm.
We can either just sort of ignore that garden, or we can have the wonderful flowers that we want or the plants that we desire. So we can make those choices. And I believe now that in my garden of my time, my energy, and my space, I am trying to make more and more space for the things that I love, for my needs. Now, the funny thing is that when I do that, I also find that I'm better equipped to take care of other people's needs in a way that is more compassionate and, less, let's say, less sacrificing of my own needs. So that's something that, this has meant to me.
Mm.
Uh, so I feel that I'm far more in touch with my needs with various practices, and I'll come to them. But and that the moment is not passing me by, where I'm just participating in something without really participating in a way. So yeah, so that's something that for me is self love and self care. Uh, as a result, what I do is I do keep time for some of the things that I like to do. So earlier, my day would be filled with very frenetic activity. Morning, I would start my work, and it would, the work would carry my day rather than me planning my day. So today, I am able to keep, those pauses for rest, for further planning, for making choices as I go along, and having more joy in my day. Let me put it that way. And as a result, the day unfolds in a day of joy, and similarly days of joy and weeks of joy. So I yeah, so that's the other thing. Uh, I also used to be very judgmental of myself, and I used to feel that when I didn't do things the way that I would have liked them to have been done, I would feel upset and also look for external reasons for why things were not working out. Today, I'm also able to take more responsibility for the way things pan out in my life. And I'm also able to forgive myself and be less critical of myself, be more accepting. And again, the funny thing is, you tend to then be more forgiving of others as well, and be more accepting of others as well. So I feel it's a much more beautiful dance of uh, activities uh, which weave in more in terms of catering to my and hopefully catering to other people's needs as well. I want to give an example which I have read, so it's not my example, read about, but I can relate to immensely. It's like earlier I would say that my heart used to be open, uh, and maybe all the doors and windows were open, and there used to be, let's say, uh, if it's like a gust of wind that would come in and sort of carry everything away with it. So, and I would feel quite bereft of my own peace and joy at the end of the day sometimes. Because in a way, I was opening that space to almost to trespassers, you know, who would come in and take, but I would not be I don't like the word control, but I would just let it happen. And today I would say that I am more with it in the sense that I can, let's say, have greater, for want of a better word, greater control over my space and my energy. So, yeah. Uh, for me, it's like a garden, therefore, really tending to a garden with so much care, being in touch with my feelings and my needs, and and also loving all of that. In terms of how I have brought it into my life, with the course of time, I had sort of let go of my health and also some of my relationships, but my health for sure. And I learned through the practice of mindful eating. But so, first paying attention to my body and realizing that there were a lot of health issues, and it was just so difficult to begin to count. I would carefully and painstakingly make notes about all the health problems, and I found that it could fill like 3 or 4 pages. So, be it asthma, be it arthritic pains, sinus trouble, stomach issues, and so on. So I also realized that part of it was also because I was rushing around with no time for things that I wanted to do for myself or even time to be. But having said that, I was always a person who did like to be. As I said, I have a lazy bone in my body. But the point is, those were rare moments. So they would remain with me, but somehow I was not able to translate it into other facets of my life. So for the health part, I yeah, I decided to sort of really zoom into my health, and I began to eat better, and I also began to take time to do some of the things I love, like yoga, and also not burden my body with so much of work, burden my body and my mind. I've done that over the last few months, and it's made a huge difference in terms of my weight, both mental as well as my body weight. So that has made me generally feel very light and feel physically as well as mentally, and I'm able to carry that into a lot of the things that I do. And I just feel that that is also one big manifestation of my of self care and self love. Why is it important? I feel it's important because many of us tend to just let life pass us by. And I think you just are in a much better position to live your life more fully because you're mindful, you're paying attention, and you're able to really take care of the things that you value. I also want to say that the same thing is applied to my work and my relations. So earlier, when I had my siblings over and so on for holidays, I would constantly say that, oh, they're here. I can always do these things myself later. And it was always later. So it was postponement into the future to have that, to take care of my needs. I would say, okay, we are going shopping or whatever, because I anyway hardly go shopping. But I would say, okay, we'll do things that they want because I anyway live here. But the moments that are spent together, they never come back. So today and over the last few years, thanks to them as well, I've learned to also carve out time equally for all of us so that, we're doing this together in such, uh, in celebrations of joy rather than me generally putting myself, let's say, putting myself last, I would say almost. So, and don't get me wrong, it was not in a self sacrificing way. That's the thing we sometimes tend to do because we're not really taking care and listening closely to our needs. So I would take time off and keep leave and things for, take leave for the things that I wanted to do. But in the doing, sometimes you can get lost by giving importance to something else. It was similar with some relationships, and I'm almost
Mhm.
ending in another minute. But I would take care to listen. Maybe I wasn't taking adequate care in the way that person wanted it or those people wanted it, but I felt I was there for them. And I felt that they were not there to just hear me out. And I didn't really want much else. I just wanted to be heard. But I somehow, because I let it be and just let it fester, I found it very hard to articulate it with confidence, saying that, look, my needs also need to be taken care of. So now
Mhm.
that I do listen to my own needs, I'm able to to articulate them in a much more relaxed and a chillaxed way because I'm in
Mhm.
touch
Mhm.
with them and I am paying attention to them. So I would say that earlier I might have looked at my relations, and I'd like you to look here for a moment in a way like this, which is I am taking care of this much and perhaps somebody else needs to take care of this much. But today I'm able to take care of things in this way. So if someone else comes in, then perhaps it's like this. So it's not in a manner where I'm saying I don't need anybody else, but it's just that you feel more self sufficient so that you're that much happier and much more able to take care of the core needs with your relationships rather than depending on other people and being needy for acknowledgement from outside. So you're looking inwards, you're listening to yourself and acknowledging your needs better. So that's what I would say is for me self love and self care.
Lovely, lovely. I think what echoes for me is this statement that you made right at the very end of feeling self-sufficient. I think that's very, very critical, and that comes from perhaps looking more inside and listening to what is happening and pausing. And I also particularly found fascinating uh, the sharing that you did, Indira, on the amount of adverse impacts or stress it has on one's own body. I think that for me, is something that strikes me as very critical uh, when we are always rushing and not looking at what we need and so on. And of course, like you rightly said, if I take care of myself, I'm automatically taking care of people around me and those relationships in a very nourishing manner. Very beautiful. uh, Ananya, I want you to come in now, perhaps, if possible, take some of these points forward and share your perspectives. Yep, yep.
Thank you.
Very
Can you
loud and
hear me?
clear. Yeah.
Okay. 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 I really have bigger butterflies in my stomach after all the sharing from Harini and Indira. I mean, yeah, I'm really nervous now. So let me see. Let me give it a try. Um, when I think of this word love itself, um, that word or what it entails or what it encompasses has shifted its meaning to me over time. So earlier on, possibly for me, love would mean a rush of feelings, of ecstatic feelings, a sense of euphoric joy. Not to say I don't feel it that way anymore. But I feel that for me, possibly now, love has moved more to understanding. So when I look at self love, that for me means that am I really understanding myself? How much do I understand of myself? And when I say myself, it is this whole organism which is in this human form, and for which this lifetime it has the name Ananya. So it's also the body, what my feelings are, what my emotions are. So it's all both positive emotions, joy, happiness. It's also the negative emotions that I have, anger, fear. Like for me, fear is a very strong emotion in me, or sense of insecurity, and a sense of deep sorrow is very strong in me. So understanding myself has probably been a way, or I would say a huge act of self-love. And that understanding I feel has really grown over time. And I feel that this year it took a quantum leap in terms of understanding myself much better in the dimensions that I just now spoke about. As a result, what I see is that there is a deep sense of reverence for this human life. And it may sound a bit of a cliche, but honestly, I feel that it is such a miracle to have this life. And in a way, I feel very grateful. There is a deep sense of gratitude for this human life of mine. At the same time, a lot of reverence for other human lives and other species who inhabit this earth. I feel that this entire, this entire process of looking deeply or looking into oneself has helped me to understand and has possibly made me much more humble to realize that we often think as human species that we are, you know, the best or superior or whatever words one might use, adjectives we might use. And we just take it for granted that we can plunder and loot this planet the way we wish to, because we feel as if everything else has been made for us. But if we just take some moment and we reflect, like today in the morning, I was just taking a walk on our terrace where we have some, um, some seasonal pots right now. And there was one pot where my husband, he has kind of put two saplings of, I mean, he had put some seeds, and so you have these tomato saplings which have come up, and there were two in one pot. And I could clearly see that they needed more space. So I came down and I was speaking to him, and I said that, they need more space, otherwise they aren't going to grow well. And he was also, we were having this conversation. And because I was reflecting on today's session, it immediately struck me that how much necessary it is to create that space, create this space for ourselves and create the space for other relationships in our lives. And that's possible when we have a sense of somewhere a deep love. That's the way I see it. Um, and that whole change in, or I would say shift in thinking, has really helped me to be more compassionate towards myself in the sense of my body, like all of us have talked about. I also have had health issues, and I spoke about it, I think, in my first session as well. I have had a lot of hypertension, I have had thyroid problems, and so on and so forth. So that was a reason why I really got much more engaged, and I realized that I have to take care of my health, which I do right now much better. I also understood that I have to look at my feelings much more and not allow them to sweep me away. So, not allow that gust of wind to come and take me somewhere else, but just to take that analogy forward, to close those windows when there is a need to do that, so that I can then sit, and if that gust of wind has, shifted all the papers that I might have in that room, I have the time to put them back together before I again open that window and allow other things to come into my life. I have felt that all of this has taken time and it is still a process. And as I have possibly mentioned in my earlier sessions as well, I strongly am an advocate that all this needs cultivation. Thinking by itself doesn't really make a change. So each one of us who are speaking here, we all are trying to cultivate it. It needs a certain degree of commitment. And I think that commitment itself is fueled by a sense of self-love. Because for myself, I have felt that because I kind of feel the need to take care of myself, I'm willing to do things, even if they are not always very easy, so that I can really take care of myself well. So I feel that my practice or this path of mindfulness is possibly the highest expression of self-love. That's the way I feel about this entire practice, and the way I do it. I mean, I fall off. I mean, it's a path, right? So half the time I'm faltering, whimpering, falling, but I'll again get up and come on that path, on that road, because I believe in it. Because I believe in it, and I believe that that's the way which nourishes me. That's the way which gives me peace, and that's the way I feel very very much contented with myself. And I have felt that as I have given the time to look at these needs deeply and to work with them, to address them, I feel that my other relationships have flowered actually. So I have also made choices of which are the relationships that I would really want to uh, want to, I don't know, I can't think of a word right now, but focus more on. Which are the relationships that really nourish me? And then how do I take care of those relationships? Because any relationship is also like a tree in the garden, no? You have to nourish that, you have to give it water, you have to give it manure, you have to take care of it. Then it flowers. Otherwise, it won't, it will dry away. So I have become more careful, more mindful of which are the relationships that really truly nourish me. And by doing that, I feel that I have been more loving to myself, because I have now decided that these are the relationships that are critical in my life for my own well-being. And these are the ones where I really nourish them. Other relationships are also important, and then I will see how I relate to them. To what extent can I really go with them? And at times it has meant taking some hard decisions as well. So, for instance, I'll just talk about my work life. Say, for example, I had this choice to kind of either continue working in this country, or I had this choice of taking a leap in my professional career and going international to other countries. But I made a very deliberate choice to stay back because I felt that that's very nourishing for me. I'm just giving that as an example, and that has not been an easy choice, honestly. That has not been very easy for me always, because I'm aware that uh, what, what what it would have brought in if I had that kind of a if I would have made that decision. But I know that deep down, possibly I'll not feel very good with that decision. I have also felt that I have had this habit of being, giving myself more to others. I think we all do, and I have often felt that um, I have not adequately taken care of myself. So I'll just give an example. See, if I enjoy cooking, and if I have guests over, say a few years back, I would get into an overdrive and cook many dishes. Because I enjoy, and I would want the guests to have a much more variety or whatever. Now, like today, I have my sister coming home. So today I will not go ahead and cook so many dishes because by the time the guests are in, I'm actually famished. And I don't even have that joy anymore left. I would rather cook a few, maybe two, and have that joy of being with whoever might be that guest. And I find that to be a big departure for me in the way things have moved. Similarly, in relationships, I feel that authenticity of relationships is very important for me. And if I feel that a relationship cannot be very authentic, I might as well then uh, give it a deeper thought that how much of myself I would invest in that particular relationship if I feel that it's not very authentic the way I look at it. And those choices have really made a big I mean, it has made me much more content. Same with my children. So I have got two teenage daughters, and one is about to be 13, the other is close to 18. I feel that because I have been able to honor my needs, I can honor their needs better. So right now, as teenagers, they have very different needs, and both the children are very different from each other. One is a little more extrovert, the other is an introvert. I know their needs are different. So I will now not go and overwhelm them with my needs. I would rather allow that space for them to understand what their needs are and to honor those needs. Say, for example, my younger daughter, she is very quiet, so she is not someone who will come and talk to me a lot, and I'm fine with it because I can see it from her body language that she's comfortable enough, and that is very reassuring for me. So it's not necessary for me to be nagging her, because I know nagging her would not be the way she would look at things. She would like it if I respect her space and if I make her more responsible.
Hmm.
And I feel that these things have been possible just because I have taken care of my needs. So I don't feel that I need to kind of be a perfect mother, which I'm not at all. And I feel that I'm just a human being, and I would do the best I can within the circumstances that I find myself in. I think that's all that I would possibly the time allows right now. So this is a topic which one could go on and explore various relationships and speak to it. But thank you for this opportunity, Giri. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ananya. I think uh, uh, if I look at it, uh, if I remove the hat that I'm right now wearing as that of a moderator of this session, and if I just look at it as an individual and as a human being, what strikes me as very interesting and at the same time as very critical is that in every case where there's an issue, the body perhaps starts screaming first in different ways. And I think Indira mentioned it uh, also very strongly. And then, there are other things that happen. So if we don't take those signals seriously enough, I think we are then going to be in some sort of a trouble. Uh, and I also, resonate with this point that all of this entire practice of understanding myself, as you said, Ananya, uh, uh, needs cultivation, and that takes time, and uh, it's not an easy process, but it's a very worthwhile and fruitful process. And this aspect of taking hard decisions in our own interest is something that also I feel is very critical, and I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people. In fact, everything that the three of you have said, I think, is something that a lot of our friends would resonate with. There are some very interesting comments that are coming up, which I would, want to put forward for further reflections. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing. But before we go on to that, a very quick, uh, break and a pause, which we can have now, and I would request Indira to lead us on that pause for a few minutes?
Okay. So, so just to sit still for a few seconds or minutes, uh, and to keep that time for ourselves and to reflect on us, our needs, and just to remember that we are not people whom we've relegated to the background, but we really are fully paying attention to us. So I'll just three sounds of the bell, and I'll request all of us to just reflect on us. And very slowly come out of the pause, and I'll invite three sounds of the bell.
Thank you very much, Indira, for that pause. Um I would like to now open this discussion up. There are some interesting reflections that I would want to put forward in, in front of you. Uh, Ruxana, makes a comment, and she says, "I used to do the same, giving and giving of oneself, not paying attention to the self." And perhaps I think she means to say that things have now changed from there. Bharat, Bharat Krishnan, nice to see you here. I'll just read out what he's written. I believe that our inner world and outer world are separated by a kind of spiritual membrane, which transmits pressures and influences from one to the other. Would anyone want to reflect on that statement? That's a very beautifully put, observation, and it's so very visual as well. There is this continuum between the inner and outer world. They're not separate, and there is communication between them. So I'll leave that at this point of time. I'll go on, but I'll invite your comments from the panel. And Bharat goes on and says, the challenge is which world do we nourish? In that, each of us must find our own path. I think this is also a matter of choice that we ultimately make. My friend Dharmendra, uh, responding to Ruxana, has also said, if we lack balance between giving and being assertive for our rights and needs, we end up self sacrificing. Hence, balancing the two traits is critical. And Sadhna has talked about reposing in the inner self, even while interacting with the world, is very restful to the soul. So, very lovely reflections and thoughts that our friends are sharing. So, would anyone want of you want to respond to some of these observations and add on to what you have already shared? I mean, the field is open for anyone to come in. Just let me know.
Sure. Uh, so I can talk about the lack of balance, which I think sort of covers some of these points. The
Mm-hmm,
lack of balance in giving and receiving.
mm-hmm,
Uh, so I feel it's again from a lack of paying attention to oneself. So I'd like to also, there's an analogy that came across my mind while I was listening to everyone, which is, you imagine that you're in a dark corner of a closet or a room versus you come out into the sunshine and you're seen and you're heard. So I would say that is the difference between really airing your views and bringing them out into the open versus locking them up and really ignoring them. And that's what I mean by paying attention. And when I talk about lack of balance, when I want to respond to the lack of balance, it is when you take time for yourself, you're also able to articulate what you need so that then you're not just giving and giving and giving, as Ruxana had also mentioned. And in a way, then also somewhere feeling very torn that while there is a certain joy in giving, and there is a huge joy in giving for that matter, it's not just as a small joy, but it's not to the sacrifice or the cancellation of yourself. So there is a dance of give and take between the parties in the relationship, so to speak. So you and that's not really a material giving at all. It's the giving here. By that I mean it's just the paying of attention, that you count, that you're also there. I think that's all what most people want, and we often tend to forget that. So when we are able to also share our needs, and also if the relationship we have, that person or those people are also able to just acknowledge them and say, yes, we just respect that you have those needs. Sometimes you can't do anything about it. But I find that just the fact that somebody knows that you have those needs and they're there to hear that you have those needs is what it is all about.
mm-hmm,
So there is a huge balance that is struck then, because then you also feel like reaching out, you feel taken care of, and you feel that you can take care of yourself and the other person. So in that way, there is a balance that is a beautiful balance, I may say, that is
mm-hmm.
struck. So that's
Okay.
something that I wanted to share.
There's just one question that comes to my mind, and this is something that, I mean, it's not uh, reflected in the comments over here. But the question that's on my mind right now is, a lot of what we call as taking care of ourselves, uh, being aware of our uh, needs, and so on, perhaps can also be addressed if we I mean, it doesn't have to be always in relationship to another person or a set of persons. So I can pursue a particular hobby or something that gives me pleasure, which is, and that is not totally dependent on me cultivating relationships with a set of people, but that is also something that is very deeply meaningful and fulfilling. So how do you look at that? I mean, that can be a very, very solitary or individual pursuit of an activity that brings me, you know, uh, that balance that enables me to feel better and so on. So how does one look at that, and how important would that be?
I think, in my sense, whatever is important to you is important as long as it's not, the intention behind it is not to harm. And in my mind, I don't think it's a question of whether it is a solitary activity or it is a activity in relation. I think at the root of it, if we see whether it's giving or receiving or anything or doing something alone or together, the difficulty arises when one part of me wants to do this, but another part of me is getting pulled in something else. Um, and per se, giving or receiving are all okay. I mean, there isn't like an absolute percentage mark, I think. But what we have within us is a host of family members within us, which I would say are different parts of us, which have different needs. So one part of me really likes to do things for another person, like really take out time to do something. But there's another part of me that really likes time by myself. And then one part decides to take charge and subdue the other part. If we really look within, that's what most often happens to us. There's a conflict within. And it is this conflict that often causes a lot of problems, emotional and physical, because a part of us is getting within us, there's a part of us getting suppressed. So therefore, and that's exactly why somebody's giving may not feel uh, too diminishing for that person, whereas for me, that much doing might be extremely debilitating because I have other needs. And so I think it's really about looking within, and I really like the listening to oneself that Indira was talking about. When we listen to ourselves in any context, we will realize that it's really not about the outside world. I mean, it is what it is, but there are different things happening within us, and a conflict of emotions, which I really like to see as sub parts of us. And can we hold all of that? Can can we listen to ourselves, each of our feelings or each of our parts fully, so that each of them gets a chance to express itself? And when we really listen that fully, take time to listen from an unbiased state, because most often we identify more with one part, which is why that part really overwhelms another need. But when we can listen to different needs fully and give it airtime,
Hmm.
integration naturally happens, and we arrive at another response as a result of that listening deeply to all parts of us. In
Hmm.
therapy, we call it integration.
Right.
Um, but that's really it's really just that it's really taking out time to see what's going on in me. So if there is this habitual need to go out and do something, but there's also this fatigue, I'm getting this acidity and back pain and all of that, what's really going on? A part of me needs rest. Now how do I give it airtime? And then when I listen to both, and both of them have equal attention from this unbiased listening, what is the response that arises? And naturally, there's a shift in how we engage with our lives, whether it's alone or with other people. But we are not in the habit of giving ourselves that much time. And self compassion is really about that. Like, if you have 5 children, you have to really give attention to all of them. You can't just say, this guy is, pretty looking, so I'm going to really look at him more, her more, or him more, and not. It's not like that. And when that happens, there's conflict in the family, there's disharmony, there's a fracture, and the same thing gets reflected within us.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I really see it like that the world is what it is, circumstances bring the demands that they do, and we have been responding from our habitual patterns. But in the process, other needs get neglected. Now, do we give enough airtime from an unbiased listening space? And then there is a wholesome response that is bound to arise, unless there's
Mhm.
trauma or things like that, in which case it's a different scenario. But in a regular situation.
Mhm. Mhm. Right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Harini. There are some conversations that our friends are having amongst themselves, and I thought I should, bring some of that to the panel as well. Uh, Dharmendra says that the moment we know and experience soul, uh, all questions depart. Hence, focus on the process of experiencing soul. There are many processes. And Sadhna agrees with him, saying that taking care of self, or sorry, she says that the body, mind, intellect needs of others and ourselves are at an outer level only. Being in touch with ourselves in and through all the outer activity cannot deprive us of any balance. So, a different perspective in terms of practice and reaching uh, something deeper. You can call it soul, or you can call it whatever you want, but then these are, I think, interesting perspectives that are uh, uh, emerging from the conversation. Ananya, would you want to add something to what Indira and Harini have said before we wind this up? Is there any thought that comes up which you want to share?
Add to which one are you referring to? I mean, anything
No,
very
no, no. It's
specific
just now
or
it's just a set of open reflections. If there are things that you want to add on to what you've said earlier, you want to respond to what Indira and Harini have said, or some of the comments that have come in, which I have been talking about. So it's just, or it's okay. I mean, if it's fine if there is nothing that you want to share at this point of time. I'm just leaving it open so that, yeah, yeah.
I yeah, I think Indira and Harini has covered quite a bit of terrain in terms of what it means in having a balance, and Harini has also talked about very beautifully about these different children, as she put it, within ourselves. In fact, Harini's when she was talking about, I was reminded of a beautiful Bengali Baul song that is there, which talks about the same thing. So it says that, one of us, a part of mine is moving on, and the other is on a horse, and that one is galloping away. So what should I do? And the other one is just sitting in a corner. So
Wow,
that
wow.
imagery came to my
Beautiful.
mind.
Mm,
That is so true. Yeah. So, and it's been beautifully sung by a
mm-hmm,
Bangladeshi singer. She
mm-hmm,
says she sang it very well. So it just brought that memory to me that these are the different people who live within me, and one of them is galloping away, the other is brooding, and the other is simply sitting.
mm,
So what do I do with all of them? I think finally it is all about. I feel that for me it has been like that, understanding myself, and it really echoes with what Indira said, that for me it has always been that whether I understand myself well, and whether I'm there for myself, and whether others are there for me when I need them. So possibly I would not need much of anything. I would just need their presence.
mm-hmm,
But are they willing to give me that presence at all, or they are not? And are they willing to be by me when I really need them?
mm.
So, so I think these have kind of helped me define how I have been. I mean, define is a restrictive word, but I can't think of, maybe create a contour, I would say, of how I look at things when I look at it from a self compassion point of view. Honestly,
Okay, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ananya. Uh, I think Komal raises a very simple point, which perhaps would resonate with a lot of people, and that's the reason why we are having this conversation, really, Komal, which is always my last priority is about myself, even though I'm aware of that. So this is an interesting thing. I'm aware that I'm not prioritizing myself, and I'm busy with taking care of my near ones. all the time. And I think this is something that I hope, Komal, that this conversation uh, contributes in some way to not only you but all of us understanding this need and this criticality of why we need to probably focus more on ourselves. And that's something like a forgotten thing. We have kept it, we have tied it up and pushed it to one corner in that closet where there's no light also that shines on it. So uh, let me then end this particular session. Thank you very much for all these beautiful reflections that you've made. I think really for me, if I look at it as a human being, perhaps this is really at the heart of everything else. This understanding of myself, as Ananya put it, uh, this listening as to oneself, giving time for oneself, as Indira put it, and of course, uh, the beautiful analogy that Harini brought about the kind and loving mother, and using that analogy to say that everything that a kind and loving mother does is something that we need to do with ourselves. Uh, I'm sure that this will set us all on the path of more reflections in the days to come. Before I sign off, I just want to announce that the coming Saturday, there's another event which I have very, uh, I should say, puzzlingly titled. Right now, I'm not going to say what it is, but it's titled Mindful Rolling. So I will be back with a session on mindful rolling next Saturday, same time, 11 o'clock. We have another set of friends who will be sharing with us their experiences of mindful rolling. So do tune in for that and contribute. Thank you very much again. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.